Brent Hinds' story doesn't begin with a guitar in his hands, but with something most people would never expect, a banjo. Growing up in Pelham, Alabama, Brent was surrounded by Southern music, the kind of sound that poured out of porches and backyard gatherings. He picked up the banjo first, and that instrument would quietly shape everything he became later on.
I used to come in here throughout the day and night for lunch, dinner, some drinks, meet up with other friends.
What made him different was that he never abandoned those roots. Instead, he took the rolling, quick-picking banjo style and carried it straight into the world of heavy metal. That's why his solos always felt unpredictable. They had the bounce and twang of Southern music but were delivered with the aggression of metal. Fans often said that Brent didn't play guitar the way others did. He attacked it, pulling strange runs, hammer-ons, and slides that felt like a mix of chaos and genius.
I think it's going to be felt for a long time. I don't think there's a rock band or a metal band in the whole Southeast that's not influenced by Mastodon and Brent's guitar.
By his teenage years, he was already searching for something bigger than small-town Alabama. He carried that wild spirit with him when he moved to Atlanta, where the underground scene gave him a home. That's where the seeds of Mastodon would eventually be planted. But Brent's path there wasn't as straightforward as you might think. And what happened next would change not only his life, but the entire metal scene. In Atlanta's gritty underground music scene, Brent found the crew that would define his career. Alongside Troy Sanders, Bill Kelleher, and Brand Daler, he co-founded Mastodon in the year 2000. At first, they were just 4 guys pushing heavy riffs in small clubs. But it didn't take long before people realized this wasn't just another metal band. Mastodon's sound was different. It was heavier than sludge, stranger than prog, and somehow still melodic. Brent's guitar was at the center of it all. One moment delivering swampy, southern fried riffs, the next spiraling into long, haunting solos that seemed to come out of nowhere. The band's breakthrough came with Leviathan in 2004, a concept album loosely based on Moby DCK. Critics were stunned, calling it one of the most ambitious metal records of the decade. But Brent wasn't chasing perfection, he was chasing feeling. That's why fans connected with him. His guitar playing wasn't polished, it was raw, unpredictable, and alive.
Him, so it was just a huge loss, not only as a person, but as a guitar player.
By the time Crack the Sky dropped in 2009, Mastodon had already cemented themselves as one of the most important metal bands of the modern era. And through it all, Brent was the wild heart of the group, the one who gave their music its unpredictable edge. But even at the height of success, Brent never fit the mold of a typical rock star. And that would lead to some of the most unforgettable stories of his career. Brent Hinds didn't just play the guitar, he bent it to his will. His style was instantly recognizable because it didn't follow the rules. While most metal guitarists leaned on speed or technical precision, Brent fused the clawing intensity of southern banjo picking with crushing riffs that sounded like they were dragged straight out of the swamp. He loved unusual tunings, often playing in drop C or D standard, which gave Mastodon that heavy, sludgy foundation. But Brent added his own chaos on top, long hammer-ons, sliding pull-offs, and bursts of hybrid picking that sounded more like storytelling than shredding. Fans described it as controlled mayhem, because you never knew where his fingers would go next. And of course, there were his guitars. Brent was rarely seen without a Gibson Flying V strapped to him. The shape, the tone, the way it roared, it became part of his identity. Gibson even honored him with signature models, cementing his reputation as one of the most influential players of his generation. His solos were unpredictable, sometimes bluesy, sometimes spacey, sometimes so dissonant you'd swear it couldn't possibly work. Until it did. That's what made Brent stand out. He didn't just play songs, he created moments. But Brent's creativity wasn't limited to Mastodon. He had an itch to experiment far beyond the band, and that's where his wildest ideas took shape. For Brent Hinds, Mastodon was never the full picture. His creativity spilled out in every direction, and he was never afraid to chase a strange idea, no matter how unexpected it sounded. One of his earliest side projects was Fiend Without a Face, a band that blended surf rock, punk, and old-school country. It was bizarre, gritty, and exactly what you'd expect from Brent, a mashup of sounds that shouldn't work, but somehow did. Then came West End Motel, where Brent showed a softer, more soulful side, mixing folk, blues, and a touch of cabaret-style weirdness. But he didn't stop there. He joined forces with members of Alice in Chains and Dillinger. Escape planned to form Giraffe Tongue Orchestra, a short-lived but fascinating experiment in progressive rock. And with Legend of the Seagull Men, Brent dove headfirst into a theatrical, ocean-inspired rock opera with members of Tool. These projects weren't just side gigs, they showed how restless his creativity was. Brent hated being boxed in. If Mastodon was his main battlefield, these bands were the playgrounds where he could unleash the wildest corners of his imagination. But for all his brilliance in music, Brent's offstage life was just as unpredictable, and sometimes it landed him in the middle of controversy. Brent Hinds was never the polished rock star. He was raw, unpredictable, and often brutally honest, sometimes to his own disadvantage. In interviews, he rarely filtered himself. He once called the music industry a DMN joke, openly, blasting the pressures and politics behind the scenes. That unfiltered honesty made him a cult hero to some fans, but it also created tension. In 2018, Brent shocked Mastodon fans when he admitted he was stepping back from the band. Burnout, frustration, and personal struggles were weighing heavily on him. Rumors swirled about clashes within the group, though Brent himself often shrugged it off, insisting he just needed space. He eventually rejoined, but the episode left fans wondering how close Mastodon came to falling apart. Then there were the wild stories from his personal life, from bar fights to onstage chaos. Brent lived like a man who didn't care about consequences. Some nights, he was hilarious and playful on stage. Other nights, fans weren't sure if he'd even make it through the set. That unpredictability was part of his legend. You never knew which Brent you were going to get. For better or worse, he carried the reputation of a true outlaw in metal. And while controversy followed him, so did brilliance. Because no matter what storm was raging in his life, when Brent picked up a guitar, everything else disappeared. And it was those unforgettable moments on stage that defined him more than anything else. For all the chaos surrounding Brent Hinds, the stage was where his genius burned brightest. Fans still talk about the first time they heard his soaring solo on The Last Baron. It wasn't just a guitar part, it felt like a journey, shifting from haunting and spacey to explosive and heavy. Then there was Crack the Sky. At Roskilde Festival in 2011, Brent's performance left the crowd stunned. He seemed completely lost in the music, eyes shut, pulling notes that sounded like they were coming from somewhere far beyond the stage. Moments like that showed why he wasn't just playing songs, he was channeling something bigger, but Brent also had a playful, reckless side that fans loved. During Bladecatcher and other chaotic tracks, he'd throw himself into wild, swampy riffs, sometimes improvising so far off course that even his bandmates looked surprised. Yet somehow, he always found his way back, turning what seemed like a mistake into magic. Whether it was festivals packed with thousands or tiny clubs in Atlanta, Brent made every performance feel like an event. You never knew what was coming next, and that unpredictability is what made him unforgettable. But beyond the music, what mattered most was how Brent was remembered by those who played alongside him, and the fans who saw him as more than just a guitarist. When the news of Brent Hinds' passing broke, the metal community was shaken. Fellow musicians, friends, and fans filled social media with stories, photos, and words that painted the picture of a man who was larger than life. Guitar World called him a once-in-a-generation guitarist who heard things nobody else could. Others describe him as a bottle rocket of creativity, unpredictable, fiery, and impossible to replace. Even musicians outside of metal paid tribute, acknowledging how Brent blurred genres and inspired players far beyond the heavy scene. For fans, it was personal. Thousands shared how his music carried them through dark times, how Mastodon's albums gave them strength, and how Brent's wild spirit made them feel less alone in their own chaos. His death left a hole, but his music became a reminder that legends never really disappear. Brent's legacy isn't just in Mastodon's catalog or his side projects. It's in the way he made music feel alive, messy, emotional, and unapologetically real. He proved that you don't have to be perfect to be great. You just have to be true to yourself. And for Brent Hinds, that truth will echo forever through every riff, every solo, and every fan who presses play. Because legends may leave us, but their sound never fades. Brent Hinds wasn't just a guitarist, he was a storyteller, a rule breaker, and a force of nature who redefined what metal could be. From his banjo roots in Alabama to the thunderous stages of Mastodon and his wild side projects, he lived on his own terms, fearless and uncompromising. His solos, his riffs, his energy, they weren't just music, they were moments that pulled fans into his world. Even in his absence, those moments linger, reminding us why he mattered. As we remember Brent, it's clear that his legacy isn't measured by awards or chart positions. It's in the inspiration he sparked, the boundaries he shattered, and the countless lives touched by his creativity. Legends may leave us too soon, but their impact echoes forever. Brent Hinds' music will keep speaking long after the last note fades.